So hey, Zatt.
Hey Zeve, how's it going?
Good, good. Yeah, I was hoping we could talk about chords and melody. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure.
There's this Charlie Parker quote, right? Learn your instrument, practice, 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 and then when you get on the bandstand, forget all that and just wail, right? So,
That's right,
and it's kind
yeah.
of like the progression of flow, right? So you got to have the
Hmm.
foundation before you can really just have melody and chords just kind of, flowing out into songs. So I was wondering if maybe we could start with like some of the learning your instrument. So in,
Yeah.
in terms of like theory, what are some of like the fundamentals that people should be starting with?
There's so many different ways to make music. What I know is Western stuff, and yeah. So maybe let's start with what a scale is, right? So C major on the piano is the easiest scale to play because it's just the white keys. Starting here, and then forming a chord, just choose any note and then play every other scale tone. So C, E, G, or D, F, A. That's so, and some of the chords are going to sound what we people say happy, and some are going to kind of sound sad, and
Hmm.
some are going to sound downright weird.
Is that the diminished there? Is that what that is?
That's a diminished chord.
Yeah.
And so depending on what key you're in, the different chords are going to have different tonalities. They're going to have different feelings.
Yep.
When you're jamming along, you don't always want to be playing C here. Usually, you want to have in the bass. You can play something. But your C chord could be here or could be here. These are called inversions when you move just one note of the chord at a time.
Hmm.
And it's great to get those kind of under your fingers.
With the inversions, like sometimes I like to just like even using the same chord, you can
Hmm.
with the different inversions, it can make it sound a lot different. D minor, and then another D minor. So those are all D minor chords. It actually makes it feel like it's maybe moving a little bit.
They definitely are they have their different characteristics, and maybe it's important to point out that technically the inversion of the chord is dictated by the lowest note, and so that is often in rock, pop, whatever the bass is playing,
Hmm.
and even if the bass is kind of moving around a little bit, it's still that low note, right? And
Hmm.
so. And so this is a D chord, D minor chord with a D in the bottom. And then if I change the top notes, it's still technically the same inversion.
Hmm.
But and so those kind of shapes that you have with your right hand in the higher notes, I like to call those inversions, but it can get kind of confusing sometimes. The other thing to point out is that so when you put an F underneath that D, you could think of this as an inversion, and it sounds pretty good.
Hmm.
If you put an A under it, which is the top note of that D, it actually sounds pretty bad.
Yeah, it's tense.
Yeah, and that's because it's creating a different interval. And so, wow, we're going really deep into music theory today.
Yeah.
But there's some intervals that sound consonant, like an octave or a fifth, right? Sixth also, but a fourth doesn't sound as consonant. And so when you have that A on the bottom and the D above it, you're making that fourth interval, which is a little bit tense.
Hmm. Basic triads, your 1, 3, 5, or your every other scale
Mm,
tone. Like if you keep
mm,
going up and like add sevens and nines, right? You can take a major chord and then you add that seven, right? You can like so you take a
yeah.
major chord, add that seven, it becomes a little more tense. When you have like it's like a G7, then it sounds even more like tense, like it needs to go somewhere. With a minor chord, right? Here's a D minor. It sounds really sad. If I take out
Mm,
those thirds and I just play the one and the five,
sure.
now it sounds like a major chord.
When you're playing in fifths, it's almost like it's a different instrument as opposed to chords, right? It's just it's just kind of a more nasally sound. You're talking about sevenths, and so just keep on skipping notes, and so you can take D minor, make it D minor 7, 9, 11. Such a pretty chord.
Back to basics. So practice, right? You need to know your chords. You need to know your scales.
Keep everything as close together as possible, and then it sounds more choral.
Next, maybe is kind of like inspiration. Where do you get inspiration from in terms of like coming up with chords?
Oh yeah, for me it's definitely mostly just playing the piano and seeing what comes out. Sometimes it's great to try a different instrument, try a different sound on the piano, and that'll often inspire me in some other way. At some point, Andrew Wong said that if it sounds good on the piano, it's going to sound good on everything. And if you have like some some crazy sound, it might sound good in that sound, but then when you translate that to the piano, it doesn't really capture it. Of course, there are a lot of really cool things you can do with really cool sounds, but if you're trying to come up with a melody and some chords, I would recommend trying to get it to work well on some standard sounds. Acoustic guitar or electric guitar without a lot of distortion, piano or strings. What about you? What inspires you when you're thinking about developing chords?
Yeah, a lot of it's like different sounds and rhythms. Maybe I've got a rhythm in mind that's kind of simple. Right, and then I might go to like a sound and try to figure out like what's gonna work in there. And that's just like E minor. It's all E minor. Trying to find something here.
That's good. Little offbeat, yeah.
Yeah, so that rhythm I played, it kind of like inspired this kind of like these offbeat, because the drums are like so square, it kind of like encouraged this kind of offbeat thing with the Rhodes, where if I didn't have that kind of beat going, I might come up with something else entirely over in that same key.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, when you're talking about developing a line or developing a melody, yeah, sometimes you just kind of come straight from the chords, but sometimes you want to kind of fit in with all of the other pieces of rhythm. You're really good with rhythms, and you hear something in your head and you can put it out. But for people like me, I have some rhythms that are programmed into my drum machine here. So
yeah, totally.
And so what I can do here is so what I like is we can kind of start with one pattern, follow to another one, and back to the first, and then we can
a little fill. Nice, yeah.
So it's almost like a random way of generating a pretty solid rhythm.
Yeah, pads are kind of a good way, I think, to find chords. Sometimes just like the pad sounds are kind of inspirational in terms of... But sometimes with yeah, so you got some rhythmic stuff going on there.
Yeah, that's one of the inspirational sounds that I have on my Juno here. It's one of my favorites. It's just opening and closing that filter in kind of a random pattern, but it does it on the eighth notes, and so it gives you kind of that rhythmic pulse as well as letting you play some chords. And so it's a way to kind of develop the timing and the chords kind of simultaneously without having a drum beat in the background.
Yeah, that's cool.
So once you have those chords, how do you figure out a melody to put on top of it?
So if I was going to make a melody, and I was starting from chords, I kind of sometimes do it in a rather like kind of technical way. And so like I've got these drum pattern here, and I'm just gonna play some chords over those.
Sure.
Right. So now I've got this here. And what I'm going to do in Ableton is I'm going to select the scale to C major so I can, it folds these notes down a little bit more, makes it a little easier to see what I'm playing. But if I was going to put a melody in here, I'm going to find some notes that fit over these chords. So let me just go over to my piano, and I can watch what these notes are while I'm playing the piano. So here, let's just try something. So now I've got that little melody I put in there. In Ableton, I can see what I did. If we look at this now, we can see where my notes fit over the actual chords, and I can say, well, this note here doesn't really fit. Yeah, let's listen to that, right?
Oh, I think that was good.
So, yeah, we can even bring it up a lot and get a growl out of it, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Can I hear it down that whole step? Yeah, I think this is a really important point. I mean, you know, when you're making music, if you have some sort of ear for what you want to hear, if you can just say, does it sound good? Do I like it or do I not like it? I mean, I think that you can go a long way. The faster you can do that, the more efficiently you can you know, weed out the things you don't like and keep the things that you do like. And so yeah, sometimes you just want to lean into what you thought was a mistake, and sometimes, yeah, you might want to change it.
Yeah, absolutely. If I was not listening to this and I was gonna say I'm gonna fix it, right? I would move that E up to an F so it fit in the chord. But when we're listening to it, it's like, hey, I like that tension. Maybe you decide you want to keep that or even emphasize it.
Yeah, and something else that I do in Ableton a lot, I mean, is especially if it's kind of some really fresh music, I play and I concentrate on getting the expression the way I want it, and then I can go back and fix the notes. Right, so the timing and the dynamics, kind of and kind of the spontaneity of it, it's something that you can record into MIDI and then go back and fix things. It's one of the advantages of working in something like Ableton. But back to practicing. I mean, when I think of learning a new piece of music, it's if you're reading something, if you're learning the way someone else wrote it, first get the notes right. Second, get the time right, and then, you know, work on the expression, right?
Totally, 100% agree. Yeah. Get the notes first. That's your foundation. One thing that's really helped me with rhythm is playing bass, for sure, because just locking that bass and playing with a metronome, right? Get those fingers to move exactly at the right time, and then you'll be able to subdivide and you'll be able to play 16th notes like no problem. Put an E in here and then in there. Practice, right?
Adam Neely has a pretty good YouTube video about that. He's an excellent bass player, and he says he still practices with a metronome to really kind of nail it down. He did a demo in his YouTube video, and it was literally off by 1.5 wavelengths. And he's like, yeah, I felt I was playing a little bit fast.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe before we try to put chords behind the melody, let's talk just a little bit about making new melodies. And so from classical Western music, I mean, there's this concept of a call and response. And the way that's usually done is you repeat the first few notes or the first line, and then in the response, but you make the ending a little bit different. And so let's see if we can do something. Yeah, that kind of works. So I guess we're in A minor. So we go from A to D, and then we go from A back to A.
You're talking about like the starting note and the ending note of like your phrases?
Yeah, yeah, the first note and the last note of each line, they kind of define what the line is doing. And so yeah, and so I guess if we go from an A to an E, it's kind of like we're doing a 1-5. And then in the response, we'll want to go to 1, and then we can go to 6. So let's try that. That'd be F. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. And you're adding chords to it now. So you've got your melody that you're thinking about where you're going from and to, and then I heard, are you adding a little arpeggio with the left hand there?
So I guess all I am doing is I'm just putting my hand there and kind of my fingers just go places. So it's not a very technical thing. And then if I end on F, what sounds good with that F? It's probably going to be either a D minor or an F major. And we could probably do both alternately.
Yeah. So it's like another way of doing it. So it sounds almost like a separate phrase, even though it's the same phrase but a different chord that you're ending on. Right?
Yeah, it sounds very unresolved here, but then very resolved here.
All right. So one way I like to think about chords is like, yeah. So you've got that melody note could be the root, the third, or the fifth. So say you have an A, right? It could be the fifth, and that would be a D minor. It could be the third, and that would be an F major, or it could be the fifth, and that would be an A minor, right? So you have this.
Another thing to kind of consider is, a lot of the notes in the melody are not going to fit into the chord, and some of them will. And do you have any tips for figuring out which ones need to harmonize with the chord and which ones don't?
Yeah. So the way I generally do it, if I'm out of the flow mode, I'm into like technical mode, or you're just stuck, right? Don't know how to fit the chords, is I look at what notes are the longest in my phrase, and I try to fit those in a chord. And the ones that are shorter or softer, I just say that's okay. It doesn't need to fit into a chord. So if I had a melody that was like, it's all around this D note, right? So anything that this D note's going to fit in will fit that little phrase there.
Yeah, so from kind of classical musical theory, these other notes are kind of passing notes, and the way we know that is they're only a step away from the D. If it were a jump, then that G, as I'm playing D and G, that G, even though it's quick, it needs to be part of the chord. And so by doing that, I'm kind of outlining probably a G chord.
Would the same thing apply to a third?
Let's say we do D, F, G, back to D. Then because you have a jump from D to F and a step from F to G, that F doesn't have to be in the chord because it's close to that G, because it's next to that G. And so it's either D and F or D and G that need to be in the chord. So it should sound good both ways. Or see?
Yeah, we talked about flow, we talked about what to practice, we talked about chords to melodies and melodies back to chords. A lot of theory stuff packed in there. Maybe we should change the title to be something about theory. Music theory 101.
Yeah, and maybe in some future video we'll talk about lyrics and singing. Okay, cool. Well, it was great hanging out with you, Zeve.
Yeah.
I had a fun time.
Yeah, love talking that music stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
See you later,
Okay.
and let's see.
Bye.
Go make some music.
Yeah.